So good evening, everyone. I'm back. Tonight we have just another, on the one hand, on the other hand, a very particular and very unique even talk. But before announcing the topic and presenting the speaker, I want to remind everyone here and to those who are watching us on YouTube as a recording that we are here not only to have a great discussion and to listen, but also to support the organization that is helping and assisting with the evacuation from Ukraine to the EU these days. It's called Helping to Live. And we're encouraging you and people out there to donate a couple of coins. It's very valuable and still very, very much needed, unfortunately. So please feel free to go and donate via link or in the donation basket here. So today's talk is going to be presented by Kamushadze, who holds a PhD in anthropology and is affiliated with Tbilisi State University and JIPA, two very much respected institutions here in Tbilisi. And she's going to talk and uncover this post-Soviet urban environment and traces of previously built era through religious not artifacts but mostly topos, right? Kind of, yeah, and then traces of cultures that were at some point suppressed and then blooming again, but in a very different way, maybe. On the example of Rustavi, a town a little bit outside of Tbilisi, very easy to approach for those who are here recently. It's really easy to go there. It's not the most popular tourist destination, probably, but you're not tourists anymore, so please, please visit Rustavi. It has a very interesting architecture, and you can see a lot of layers of history there, plus, I mean, German settlements and built by Germans, I think, buildings.
Sorry?
There are some buildings built after the war by Germans, and it yes. has really interesting history, some of
but after
those settlements. Yeah, definitely. But tonight we're gonna learn a lot of new stuff that only historians and urbanists, maybe some urbanists, digged into, not very many, and it's gonna make our future trips to Rustavi more exciting, and just would give a lot of understanding on how this multi-religious, multicultural country were overcoming or re-evaluating its recent history. So please welcome Taya.
Thank you so much for your introduction. I'm very excited to be here with you and present my research. I thought that I finished Rustavi, but still I'm here, and I would like to present my research and I will try to convince you to visit Rustavi. So the title of my presentation is Visibility of Religious Faith in the Urban Space of Rustavi in Georgia. So on this topic I will try to speak about how religious faith is presented there, and how this tension is between international and national can be observed here. Here I have my outline of the presentation. First, I need to speak about the context, when and how this city was designed, about the specificity of the city. I would like to speak about representation, how communists presented Rustavi to the Georgian society, and what it looks like now, this post-Soviet city. I will speak about the first Georgian Orthodox Church in Rustavi, how it is connected to these Soviet communist narratives, communists presented to society, and I will speak about other religious groups. I will speak about very shortly about methodology and some theory as well, and mostly I will be focused on the function of yard chapels. If you visit Rustavi, you will notice that there are a lot of yard chapels, and what is the meaning, what is the function of these places. So there I will share with you interpretation of these yard chapels, and then I will go to conclusion. Actually, here is how Rustavi started. As you see, it's kind of desert, it's empty place. So for communists, it was the great opportunity to build city they wish. So the idea was to build a socialist ideal city for workers. So every city, actually in Georgian we call kalaki, and in English we have this distinguished town and city according this amount of people living there. But here I will use everywhere, as Paulina mentioned, that this is, she called it town, but I will call it city, beside the fact that it's quite small, but it was designed like industrial and like with the blocks, so I will call it city. So they have this idea that it must be this industrial with heavy industry and for workers, and every places like this in Georgia have their villages. Only Rustavi is the place there is no villages around it. So this is, it has this specificity that, for example, in Ebuli or in Giatura, people who were workers, at the same time they were peasants. They have this agricultural part. But who came to Rustavi, they have this cancelled their previous life, and they became the poor workers and labor force. So they needed to have this kind of exemplary city. So it started after the Second World War. They have this idea to having this heavy industry and ideal socialist city. Actually, this is interesting that how they decided to calling people coming here to live there. As for Georgians, it's quite difficult to leave their land and to go somewhere. For this purpose, it might be they decided to call it not only the industrial socialist city, but they called it Rustavi, which means which somehow they tried to connect to our great Georgian poets from 12th century. Have you heard about Shota Rustaveli? So for Georgians, you might know Rustaveli Avenue. So it's after this great Georgian poet. So for Georgians, he is the most important person, and so they decided not to call the city industrial one, but they decided to call it Shota's city. So as the Rustaveli is someone who So this name gave them opportunity to connect this great Georgian poet to this place. Together with this industrial and socialist profile, they connect to this national project. So they have this idea that they are building not only industrial city, but they are reviving the medieval Georgian city, which was buried under the ground. So first builders who started to build here the industry, they became kind of archaeologists at the same time, as they find many archaeological artifacts on this place. So it's interesting how communists built two cities at the same time. First one was this industrial one, and second one was this historical one. So they have created these two narratives. One was the city of 40 brothers. This also interesting naming the city, that they wanted to show that this can be happened thanks to our friends, people who came here together with Georgians to build this industrial city. So this is kind of branding this multiculturalism, multi-ethnical composition of the city. So they wanted to show that this was happened caused the Soviet Union, and they have also some idea that Rustavi could be served as a model of Soviet Union as well, as they were gathered different nations and different people coming here and living together peacefully. So they have created these two images of the city. One is this industrial one, and second one is the Shota city, historical one. So here is the city of 40 brothers. So they have these different ways to show and to promote the idea of multiculturalism. So they have this city of, they calling this place city of friendship, city of youth, ideal city, city of workers, and city of future. So they using these names in newspapers and in different advertising the city. So at the same time they have they needed to have in the urban space as well. For example, they have the square of friendship, for example, main avenue of people's friendship. And it's also interesting now, the main street was called Street People's Friendship. And now they just have missing these people, and now we have Avenue of Friendship in Rustavi. This is also kind of symptoms which we can observe what's happened after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and we somehow lose these people. So at the same time, the communists, to promote the idea that they were building historical city as well, they are reviving this and restoring this idea of having historical one. In almost the in an empty city, it was created a museum. So there was no people, no blocks there. First they built the museums, and the concept of museum was also very interesting. On the first floor they have these archaeological artifacts, and on the second floor they have how they started to build the new Rustavi, new industrial city. Here I will show this one. So they have this comparison at the same time, that what was and what they are doing now, and promoting the idea how communists save the city, how they discover city. And interestingly, there is the we can observe that historians started to investigate Rustavi after this archaeological, they started to investigate city archaeologically after they started to build the city. So before, hence there was very few evidence to prove that there was the medieval town in previous time. And there are several poets and writers promoting this idea that it was historically here, that there was a very important place and it was destroyed, and now they, thanks to communists, they find it and they rebuilt it, and they promoting this idea to revival the city. And what happens after, so communists created these two narratives, international city, friendship city, and national one. And this idea of having national place, the meaning, shortest city, so they needed, it somehow served to start to think to having church there. So if it is a historical city, if it's a national one, it must have proven by having church there. So historically, this was very important for Georgians, and everywhere you can find the churches, which is the indicator that is historical. So to prove that it was historically important place, they have to find the place to, which indicates that there must be churches somewhere. And in 1991, we have a book after Kamushadze, who was the writer and who was the head of union, writers union. You might know that in Soviet every country have these unions where writers were united there, and they have only style have to use it, and it was the socialist realism. So Kamushadze was on this typewriter, and he was describing the heroes from factories from different places who were part of this project. So, but very close after the collapse of the Soviet Union, he wrote the book, God is with us. So it was very radical shift from communist to become a believer, very, and he in his book he is describing how religious was important for Rustavians, how they starting to think about to having church in Rustavi before collapse the Soviet Union. And here we have this quotation from his book where he's writing that once Gigolord Kipanidze was one of the most read intelligentsia, let's say, theater editor. So he was moved from Tbilisi, Marjanishvili's theater to Rustavi, and he promote the Rustavi theater too much that from Tbilisi used to go to Rustavi for his performance. And once he's writing there, once Gigolord Kipanidze said, "We have established a theater. What is a city without theater? But a city cannot be the real without a church either." Yes, we all felt it, but we kept silence. So he is somehow trying to explain how they started. Then he's telling the story how they first make the union of Rustaveli's organization, and thanks to this Rustaveli organization, they starting to promote the cultural heritage, to protect cultural heritage. And in this case, they started to ask to have a church in Rustavi. So it is believed that it was the first church built before the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989. So this is the first church in Rustavi. It's also interesting that they believed that it is built on this ruined church. So they have this idea, they are restoring, they are rebuilding, not just creating on an empty place. And they believe that it comes from 5th century, these ruins. And also the naming the first church also interesting, Hareba, which annunciation. So this was kind of beginning of something new. So this has some important symbolic meaning. I want to describe briefly. It's quite a small town, small city. It's less than one of the district of Tbilisi, for example, Samgori or Isani. It's about 120,000 people, inhabitants are there. So it's quite small. But still they have a lot of churches there, 25, it may be more because 10 was under construction, so right now it can be more than 25. The first church has a special meaning, and we have also cathedral called after King Vakhtang Gorgasali. So naming the church after king, it's not very common, it's not very usual, but it also has this meaning to have history there. So this place always needed to prove its importance, and for Georgians, as the history is very important, so they needed to be connected to the history. So it's also from 5th century. So this idea to have this history there, it's very important. And I would like to also talk about Rustavi Sioni. As you see, it's look like quite old one, this church, as you might guess. So our patriarch, Ilya II, 3 times said that I have seen a miracle, and what it goes, why it's so what it's miracle about to having this church there. It goes to this construction, the type how they built it, as they tried to invented traditions, how it was built in medieval ages. So it lasted 10 years to build this church, because there is no iron like what we use in modern construction. They used materials used to familiar from medieval ages, and they needed to learn it, how they built it, at that time. So it's also needed to add that the decors and ornaments are taken from different churches, which is most famous, and so they needed to have historically look this. And I have heard a lot of stories how people used to bring eggs for this, making these materials to build this church. So this is how it was important for them to have church which was built like in medieval ages. And so interesting just to have this point that this building was awarded Grand Prix from World Architecture Exhibition because of this tradition and innovation. How it was. So this is also kind of example how history is important for them. Here I put these images to just show how many churches and yard chapels are in this place, in particular place. So there are a lot of, as on this presentation you can, on these pictures you can observe. It's quite visible, and in almost everywhere you can observe the signs of this religious. now for Orthodox Christian Church, it was easy to establish there. It was somehow related to this history of the city, and so this narrative serves for them to promote Christianity as it was natural for them in previous time. So for this narrative goes to this way, this national one. But what about the international image, international narratives? How it serves this multiculturalism or religious pluralism? How it goes to? As we can see in this place, it does not work properly, because for other groups, other religious groups, it's not easy to establish in this urban space. And one very good example to look this is this Latin Catholics try to have church there. First, they have the place in New Rustavi. Rustavi is divided on two places, old Rustavi and New Rustavi. They have the place in the very center. So, but it was very difficult for them to receive permission. They asked the municipality to give them permission, but they could not receive, and 5 years needed to have this different lawsuit to finally have permission. And actually they could not build the church on that place. They were forced to change this place to more periphery. Then later on and actually on these photos it's very interesting that they have this kind of performance, an open air, to put this door of mercy to show that they have this place, but that they could not have a church, afford to have church. But later on, after 5 years waiting and demanding, and even Pope was somehow involved there, because when Pope came to Georgia, they took them to Rustavi. So this was very big pressure to government, to the local government as well, to somehow receive this permission. This is only case when it was quite big resonance in society. Here also we have this church, and so 5-year dispute over the establishment of Catholic parish in Rustavi was amicably solved, but Pope's intervention and report in the Italian media concerning the violation of the religious rights indicates the seriousness of these problems. So this is how it finally solved, but not easily. What about the Muslim community? And as I don't know if you know it, Rustavi is the central city of Kamushadze, and Kamushadze is mostly populated by Azeris, who are Muslims. Biggest minority in the city is Muslim community. According to data, they are 4% biggest, but according to informal talks, they indicate that it must be about 20%. So I put this. I don't know, it's different numbers, but still it's biggest minority, religious and ethnic minority. So for them it's not actually possible to have any kind of place together and to worship. So, but I have different interlocutors. I spoke them, and they even don't want it to have it, and they are not demanding. And so sometimes they even have this. how to say, ignoring this. They just don't want to speak about religious. And when I talked to one of the young ladies, she said that my parents even worried not to be religious that much. They worried not that they, now she just don't interested to be religious at all. So, but I talked to the religious person. It's called Ahundi. It's religious category, and they are Shia Muslims. And he told me that they have three problems there. They have no cemetery there, but right now, after we talked later on, he told me that they solved this problem. They have no place for worship. They have to hire different places to gather, and so it's quite difficult them to have this place. And they have no school building. There is Azerbaijani school there, but they have no own building. So actually, you could not find any information if they have any attempts to have their place or any mosque there. But I have heard that there was one. Once they tried to have that, but Christians gathered signs that and it was neglected. So they just leave this topic, and they have no idea right now to have it there. So there is no Muslim place, worship place there. But they have Aliyev's statue and Aliyev Square, which is somehow indicates the importance of these groups, how they are connected to this. And this is somehow very interesting stories, but it's another topic. Here we have Lutheran Church in Old Rustavi, but it was built very early after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So, I would like to mention that this is only place you can feel this international, what must be when it was in Soviet time. That they used to say that it was a very international city, it was international place. And here they have services in 3 languages. Actually, most people are Russian speaking, but priest, she is who is the main person there. She does not want to have service only in Russian. This is kind of political as well decision. So they are mixing Georgians, Russians, and sometimes German as well. And it's also interesting to mention that somehow this city was called German city. Why Germans? After the Second World War, all infrastructures, what is metallurgical plot, was taken from German. So German used to come and to teach locals how everything works and how they checking, and so there were a lot of Germans there, and Germans also built a lot of buildings in Old Rustavi. So they have this idea that it's a German city, and they have, and some of them left, stay there, and so it was. Somehow culturally accepted German. So, and Lutheran Church has somehow easy to be part of urban environment. So it was not as difficult as for Latin Catholics.
Some of them were prisoners of war.
Yes. Actually, I wanted to speak a few words about the, we have Pentecostal church also, but it's very interesting how they established in Rustavi environment. They just bought a private house. And first it was quite difficult for them as they gathered, but later on some people went there to live. As they became the neighbors, so they are normals, and so somehow they adapted, and so it was now easier. And it's also interesting, Jehovah's Witnesses. What strategies they use to be visible. Actually, from religious group, minority groups, Jehovah's Witnesses is more visible than any of them, any other. So they have this strategy that they built. They are not asking permission for municipality to have this religious building. They just built this business center. So then they sell, and they have this building, and they are not calling it a religious building. And actually, our law gives this opportunity. There is no special rules and special permissions are needed for that. So they just having them, and it's a kind of strategy. And what I want to focus for today's speech is the function of VR chapels. As you might guess, there are a lot of Georgian Orthodox churches, and why they needed to have in every places. I would say that in these places there is no special rituals, no services, no priests are not coming, and there is nothing happening. There is nothing going there something. So there is a question. Then why they needed to have it? As it's built by funding a neighborhood. So this is their money. No one is financing, no government, no special organizations are financing these yard chapels. So this is the question. Now I will try to, maybe you have some ideas why they needed to have it. Or just trying to follow me in this, trying to find out. First, what I observed, I made a lot of interviews from the people who are somehow connected to these places. Maybe they were initiators, or they were observing this process from the beginning and what's going now. And what I observed is that having this or building these yard chapels was the only topic where the whole neighborhood is uniting. So they have this consensus, no one against, they are very enthusiastic. All of them want to somehow participate in building this chapel. So this was only thing they used to communicate to each other and to gather, and afterward they are taking care, and in this also they are doing together. So this makes them feel like they are neighbors.
I was going to say, is this linked at all to, well, I'm assuming it somewhat is this linked to the fact that Rustavi has only had a very short history, so trying to build generations of communities and areas in which people feel connected needed to be expedited?
Thank you for this comment. It's really, really connecting.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? Because without the mic, we cannot record the question. So, can you...
Question was what's this purpose of this? Why they built these yard chapels? So and I'm very thankful for your comments. It's really very reasonable, and this idea that this is also one explanation could be. But let's go and see. So what I described this is how neighborhood is organized around these chapels, and starting from the beginning, how when someone has this idea and wants to implement, how others trying to help, and everyone used to say that they try their best what they have. Some of them are builders, some of them can decorate, some of them write or bring something. So all of them try to do something at least. For example, to bring food for people who were working on this. So this is something very important for them, feeling this neighborhood. What I also find very interesting, for me it was kind of civil activism in a way, as they try to prevent the place for privatization. As they were afraid that local municipality would sell, and some investor could come and put ugly building or something. So especially when it's on the central place, they have this feeling, and they decided to prevent from this intervention from state. Okay, I will speak about the permission as well, because this is key question, how they understand if they needed to have at all. I will go to this question. I find this several responses where I find that how they were afraid to someone would come and bring their ideas to put something ugly buildings, if I use their words. So the idea was the private owner might have come and to this area, and that ugly building might have been built. So this is how they can prevent this, and if they put their cross, so government could not remove this. So this is this idea how they use this religious stuff against having their place there. So another very interesting explanation, interpretation, or just having on this photo, looking at these photos, this is becoming quite green. And they're decorating this place and putting plants and keeping it clean. So, and when one of my interlocutors told me that when he was young, only green places, when Rustavi was gray in 90s, the only green place was this, and they have even fontaine, and he used to come because for him it was quite a nice place in that period. So he has this feeling that it is greener and nicer. So it somehow serves as a green place and the recreation zone. One is also very interesting explanation is safety issue. As safety is very important for neighborhood or for any places, so they have feeling that if they have this kind of place, it make this place safer. As people could not make crime on this territory, it's it somehow prevents them to do something wrong.
And does this actually work? Like, do people respect these public areas?
Yes, actually they respect this place. They have this feeling that they are very respectful, and even they have this idea not to put the table there, not to have the feast there, to drink and to just have noisy. So they have this idea not to, you should behave properly on that place. You can cross, you can put candle, but not commit the crime on this place. So this is also, and for them to have children there, it's safer. So this is also this case. For example, if, for example, someone wants to steal nearby, I don't know how one could dare to steal. so they have this perception that people will behave differently on this place. And another guy told me that his friends decided to create this chapel because that this place was have bad reputation. And one of the reasons to have this was this idea to make it safer. One also very interesting explanation is folk shrine. I wonder if you have been to mountains, Georgian mountains, for example, in Eastern Highlands. So there are shrines there. So one of explanation could be that these people came from mountains and they were not allowed to have their shrines there. And when it was possible for them, they tried to, it somehow, by shape and by how it looks, it can be, reminds you this idea that it looks kind of shrine. So, for example, if I read the quotation from Nodar, these people were gathered and brought down from mountain. They settled here and emptied the mountains to develop Rustavi and industry. In the mountains, the people had their own traditions, which were combined with Christianity. So this is also explanation that their Christianity is not that Christianity, but it's combined. So this is also something different looking. It's not church. But of course, every sign indicates that it's Christian. I am also interested how church looks this, how priests perceive this, to having this. Actually, what I observed, they are quite willing, quite open to give some recommendation as well. But what was interesting for me, one of them told to initiators that don't put their sacrifice box where you should put money. And the idea was that if someone will come and cross and put money, maybe they have the feeling that they don't need to go to church. In this case, it could be somehow competing this place, so they don't want the church lose their function. So, this could be part of this. What's their attitudes to if they needed to sacrifice? So this is also, and interestingly. They have this open ceremony, old yard chapels, and they used to invite priests every time. But this is only case when priests used to come and to bless this place, give this permission. But after that, there is no any evidence that a priest is connected to this. But they perceive it, of course, as a Christian place. About the permissions, of course, one of my questions was about permission. If they have permission, as you might know, if you want to build something in public space, you should have permission. But for them, it was not easy question, and I received different kind of how they perceive this question. Who must give this permission? Sometimes they have this idea that the source of this permission should be community. Community must agree, and if everyone is agreed, this means that they have this permission. One source is that church should give this permission. They have to ask priest, and if priest agreed, so they have this permission. Very few have this idea that it must be connected to municipality. Some of them say that they must have They should have. They were not sure if they have at all, but they have this perception that they must have. When I talk to architect of the city, who is responsible about the buildings and any kind of constructions in the public space of the city, I received answer that there was no single case when someone addressed them for this kind of permission. So there was no any kind of permission from municipality at all. So this is the how I try to conceptualize this idea. Is this sacralization of the place, or it's desacralization of this place? So I use here this Silvia Serrano's idea, how state try to desacralize the place, and in this way make share this to whole community. For example, here you can see Rabati. Have you been there, or you might have heard? This is a place, this was idea to have this multicultural, to promoting the tolerance, how tolerance we were and how it's important. Here we have mosque in this castle and church as well, but it's interesting that none of them is functioning as an institution. So mosque and church is not work. So they just kind of museums, just showing. So it's desacralized place, and in this way it's shared. So this idea is that to make it accessible for everyone, it needed to be desacralized. I'm trying to take this idea on these chapels, as I found interesting that in Rustavi there are religious minorities also somehow involved in this building the year chapels. And as this year chapel serves as in general needs of the society, it could be somehow be desacralized as well. So they are sacralizing the place, but at the same time it's kind of desacralization of sacred. So this is how, somehow, but it's also needed to have time to see how it works later, how it will be developed later. But what we are observing now, it's quite trendy to having these yard chapels, and they almost all neighborhood has this desire and wish to have this kind of yard chapels. And what I quote here from Zia is that how Azeri kids were very enthusiastic to building this, and she mentioned that from the beginning even they were lighting candles there, but later on they find out that it's not very proper for them to behave like this, and they give up it. So, but I could not find even single example when someone objected, someone has something against to having these yard chapels, which is the sign of Christian. This also somehow has this idea if it's sacral or it's kind of desacralization at the same time. So here I have conclusions. If you don't mind, I will read quickly, and later on I will give you floor and your questions, your remarks, your ideas. Yard chapels of Rustavi corresponds to general politic interest and go beyond the purely religious and sacred purpose. the whole neighborhood participate in this creation, and this fact has not been protested by people of different religious faiths. It is revealed that yard chapels are mainly created to occupy public space, so that the state does not alienate part of their yard and does not place an ugly building there. It is also believed that these chapels will serve to secure their yard and protect them from crime. Yard chapels are green and well-kept space where children and elderly can safely spend most of the day. Many elders have found an occupation by taking care of chapels and having thus realized their skills. Chapels in this form, on the one hand, expands the understanding of sacred space, but on the other hand, there is also particular desacralization, profanization of chapel itself, since these retain a certain autonomy from the official church, and church ceremonies are not practiced. For example, the yard chapels are shared in neighborhoods and the cities where people of different religions live together and form common living space. So this is my conclusion regarding these yard chapels. And what I missed is that this also serves this visibility. That they wanted to show their faith. So for them it's kind of being there and showed up and prevent from different kind of appearance. So this is also part of having these chapels there. So here I will stop and I will ask you for your comments, for your questions, any kind of remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tara. Yeah, so I think, yeah, we have some questions, probably. Who's gonna be first? Yeah, Anna? Yeah, can you please come to here, I think? Yeah, because I think we don't have enough of the length of the wire.
So firstly, thank you very much. And I just wanted to ask, so you mentioned that yard chapels have become really popular in Rustavi, but do you know if other cities in Georgia have kind of copied that and taken it as well?
Thank you for question. Yeah, actually we can find this kind of chapels in different cities, but not so much, not so frequently, not in that variety of forms and shapes. So there are some, but not that much and not that arrangement. Thank you.
Sorry. So kind of going on from that, I was just wondering if that's because obviously Rustavi was built like during the Soviet period, so it didn't have any of its any kind of pre-existing religious centers. So do you think that that was again just another strong response to the fact that there was nothing to hold on to, and therefore they had to kind of create these symbols of their faith out of pretty much rubble? Thanks.
Thank you so much for your question. So you're right. Actually, my dissertation was about Rustavi that I was investigating years, and so I have this broader picture of this city. And you are right that what I called now the situation, I describing what's going in Rustavi. For me, it's searching for new identities. So this is how they try to find for them who are they and what they present, and so this is of course connected to these gaps or these And actually, as you might guess, as Rustavi was industrial, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, all industry has gone, and the very short amount of factories are functioning, and in a different way. They just, if we compare to that period, it's nothing. So it's quite poor. Unemployment very high, and they used to come almost every day to Tbilisi to find the job, and most of them are working in Tbilisi. So this is also a process of trying to search their identities, and this could be also serves as for this purpose as well. And response, as you use this term, to this Soviet heritage.
So do you think Rustavi felt the pain of the collapse of the Soviet Union in a different way to other Georgian cities?
Sure, of course, because it was totally, it was rooted. But still, they have this, for example, communists built not only this industrial city, historical one as well. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, this multiculturalism, this heavy industry is collapsed, and actually different ethnicity left the city. It's not multicultural as it was in Soviet time. So this is not important. This have this multiculturalism, and this national one has no support from government. So it was quite how to say, fragile. For example, no one believes that Rustavi is connected to Rustavi. But in Soviet time, it was strongly promoted by government. And even I have heard that Stalin forced special scientists to include this version of his origins. So, as you might know, for Stalin, Rustavi was very important, as he has this feeling to be barbarian from province. So he promoting much about Rustaveli, and he also needed to promote this idea that it was they rebuilt the Shotas city. But for today, it's not relevant, not scientifically much supported. So they lose these both narratives. So they needed to find a new one. And they are digging in distant past. And so this Christianity also is searching their history and building their history and having history in their places. So this also serves in these terms, so to having this their identity. For example, I was participating in having participant observation. I was part of the, there was competition in history, and they divided the Georgian history in periods, but they missed this socialist one. And when I was asking, where is this period? They said that, oh, it's complicated. It's because it's about the memory, and so it takes this amnesia. So they just skipped this. They don't want to reflect. So they are not considered that it's socialist one. So they are promoting that this is historical one. So for them it's quite complicated.
So, questions? Okay, first Vera, and then, yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh, Theo, thank you for this wonderful research and your observations. I have never thought of Rustavi, that it could be so interesting. Like, I've been there a million times. I have friends who live there, but I always took it like as a collapsed industrial town with no identity. And as you said, they were looking for the identity of the collapse of Soviet Union. They wanted to show probably they're like normal Georgians who have their roots, and there were no roots, and they created these roots, right?
Yeah.
And you answered my question, which I had originally in mind, but I was wondering if these, what you call chapels, remind you of little water fountains in the Tbilisi courtyards that we call tsaro, that has a name. For instance, if somebody would die in the neighborhood, they would put a little fountain for drinking water and would give a name of, for instance, if I die, they would say Vera's tsaro, Vera's water, and little shrine. So
Yeah.
weird, in my opinion, but I wonder if this looks like it putting something that everybody would respect in the middle of your yard. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And actually, I'm wondering if you've been to Khevsureti.
Yes.
In Khevsureti, you will also find these springs there, calling for someone who died. Actually, what I observed, there are several chapels honoring, for example, for their kids, or someone died also. There is some stories who is connected to special events happened. For example, one was built by grandfather, and he has these grandsons, and they were ill, and they wanted. He has this desire to ask to God to help them. So for his honor, he put this chapel there. So there are some stories connected to special events, have this idea to say thank you to, and actually there are also some stories that someone who wanted to have this good name, and he financed this. So for him, it's quite having this reputation to become good guy. So there are some stories, but in general, there are how neighbors gathering for this purpose. This was for me most striking one, that there is nothing else makes them feel union. Thank you for your question.
I think we have another question here.
Hello, thank you for the interesting lecture. You mentioned people coming from the mountains and building those yard chapels. Do you mean the ecological migrants from Svaneti, or like people who
You
come
mean
down?
eco-migrants, no? Yeah?
From Svaneti, people who come down to Kvemokartli region?
No, not this case. Actually, there are people. We have very Soviet movie. They descend from mountains, and actually, this is about Rustavi. It's the whole fabula is about how they came to build factory. And how first they see that empty place, and they asking where is the factory, and then they used to send to Russia to study how to melt this iron, and then they came and they see these factories. So this was giant, and this industrialization, which gives this impression. As regarding so Khevsurians used to came here, and in Soviet time it was quite difficult to attract people to come to live there, and they used to give flats for free. They promoting from different ways, but still it was difficult to force people to come here. And actually, I have heard that even prisoners were allowed to live there. they needed to have people there, so it was not easy. But not actually very few people from Svaneti. There might be some, but it's not like they are just. But yeah, in Kamushadze there are a lot of eco-migrants from Svaneti. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any more questions from the audience, maybe? If I may, I would ask one question.
Sure.
But probably, not probably, but most likely it's going to be a really funny one. Just uncovering my lack of knowledge of some pages of Georgian reality, which is fine, I think. You were mentioning, you were talking about industrial city, right? And all these religious narratives in it. And I know that you specialized particularly in studying Rustavi.
I was.
But while listening, I've been thinking about two places which were also in Soviet times very, maybe not blooming, but they were really effective. Probably you're guessing now what I'm going to talk about. And I have a weird, let me use this word, some weird architecture, historical, social and labor rights concern / crush on those cities. It's Tkibuli and Chiatura. And I've been in both places for several times. And at least Tkibuli, it was constructed in this, Gorod Sad, it was called, kind of like garden city, kind of
because
thing.
of the environment.
Yeah. And I'm still hopeful for this. They are both former miner cities, towns, centers of mining. Placements. So I wonder if we could, probably I haven't discovered it at all, but I didn't see any religious kind of temples or anything in this kind of, it's understandable on the one point. At the same time, people had to have something instead, right? Because they were not historical placements.
For example, in Tribuli, we have these workers in mining, but they were peasants as well. They used to go to their villages for a weekend. So they have this connection to these villages and to sacred places as well. So they had there. So there was no need needed. There are churches built in Tribuli and in Chiatura as well. But there was no such a need. For example, in Chiatura, a lot of sacred places there.
They're a little bit outside
historically.
Of
but in villages, they have, for example, all cemeteries have churches in Chiatura, for example. So there is no need to have, to build. So it's also there. So they don't need to have find the sources to build kind of chapels of. And actually, this is also interesting that Chiatura and Tribuli never were intercultural, international. So it was Georgian. So there was no tension with these communists. So it still remains to be quite ethnically Georgian.
But people were not brought to be settled there to work. Right?
Yes.
Yep. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, but unfortunately, I didn't have time to study it profoundly. There's like religious layers of those miners' towns, but cities towns. Yeah, but it's a good actually point. Yeah, and it explains a lot. I think that people from surrounding areas were working in those mines, unlike in Rustavi, right, which was like a massive industrial center, and a lot of people just moved there from different. By force
forcefully.
and mostly by force. So they were driven to keep something, some part of their identity, and to rebuild it, right?
Yes. So, but as they have this connection to their land, to their places, to their roots, to their history. So there was no need to create after that, after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Right. But I still think that as I presented it, it was a maybe very superficial and funny question, but it's also good to keep it in mind, right? There's like in Georgia, it was like such a different dynamics in the industrial place and industrial centers still, right? Because both Kibuli and Chiatura, they are quite distanced from the capital, and up there, people already had a little bit of different.
Also look at it as how Church after the collapse of Soviet Union showed, probably there is this important issue now when you brought this example, and the differences between these towns could be that the narrative that was brought by Church after the collapse of Soviet Union was that Georgian identity goes through Christianity. So if those people who lived in industrial, absolutely Soviet town, they had to show their identity, which was Christian, which would have been Georgian. So to be real Georgian, you had to show how Christian you are while you had no churches there. So I think that was this weird way of kind of finding your way into this new understanding of what being Georgian means.
Absolutely. And actually, I call this place, this small place with these big issues. So this is quite big things were going on and challenging each other, and this idea of being Georgian and what was Georgian and what was Soviet. And so this is how now it's going, this process of searching identities through this Christian and going to constructing this what must be Georgian. And I also mentioned that this is the center of Kamushadze, which is also a very crucial point that this is mostly populated by Muslim population, and this is also makes this more actual, and importance gives this, and this tension also makes more vivid. So everything is going there quite openly. And actually my point is that Rustavi is one of the most exemplary place of what's happened after the collapse of the Soviet Union. How damaging this was for us. And everything you can find of what is connected, and how we deal with the Soviet heritage, how we're just hiding, not reflecting. And my general point is that we should speak about, we should consider, we should reflect on these topics we are concerned. So this is not just to renovate and put new things, and not just be aware what was.
Like Aliyah's, what do these Azeris have to do with Aliyah, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just remarkable how Georgians see Azeris as part of Azerbaijan.
Yes.
Is not this a disaster?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thank you so much. I think it would be a really good topic for another discussion that I hope we're going to have here. And I think we can wrap up tonight, maybe. Yeah, thank you very much for such a great talk. We would definitely add a link to Tea's research. I think it's going to be fine, and it's really interesting to our recording, and we're going to share it. I think we all get a little bit more inspired to discover other sides of Georgian culture and history tonight. So thank you very much for coming. And please, feel free to donate something to Help and to Live, or to follow the link, or to share with your friends maybe, if you're just watching it or you're here. Just share the link with other people who are not in Georgia right now, but who would be feeling like, yeah, there is a donation box on the table over there. So, yeah. Thank you so much. And, see you next Friday again. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.